Okay, everybody, I think we are good to go. And so welcome. Thank you very much for your patience. It's a pleasure to follow these wonderful speakers you've listened to the past few days. Brian Forrester, Brett, Trish McCannon, Miriam Delicato, Laura Eisenhower, Jason Martell, Grant Cameron, Don Schmidt, Lynn Katai. Wow, James Gilliland. It just goes on. And I especially want to thank Neil Gower for hosting this. This is my third webinar with Portal to Ascension. You can check out my other two on the arrival of Christ consciousness and the rainbow body of light, which we did in 2015, which were very exciting for me to participate in. And also want to thank Jonah Bolt for hosting as well. So thank you all very much. So let's get into the presentation. So we make sure we get all of this material in before we turn into pumpkins here in about an hour and 48 minutes. My presentation is called Ancient Alien, Artificially Intelligent Astro Chickens, Self-Replicating Robots, and the Ancient Egyptian or Atlantean Island of the Egg. It's a mouthful. The impetus for this presentation was interviews that I did for season 9, the upcoming season of Ancient Aliens. They interviewed me about the possibility that alien robotic probes or cedar ships were sent to Earth in ancient times. And when they first proposed these questions to me, I thought they were just a little bit out there. But then I started to really look into this, and I came upon the research of Dr. Freeman Dyson in his book, Disturbing the Universe, where he contemplated how humanity could build a small self-replicating automaton that could explore space more efficiently than a manned spacecraft could. He called it Astro Chicken. And this spacecraft theoretically could lay an egg on another world and replicate itself. This question that Ancient Aliens was posing and Dr. Dyson was addressing as well was the simple matter that flesh and blood, the human body, cannot cross the barrier into space. The human body is simply too fragile to exist in space, even in a tin can spaceship. Many scientists are now aware, including NASA, that we are going to have to transform into another form if we are to cross the boundary and live in space. Hypothetically, any advanced civilization that we would think of as humanoid and think of also as flesh and blood beings would have also faced this same barrier, crossing the impossible distances for one thing, but two, flesh and blood bodies are not that conducive for living in the hostile confines of space. Our bodies cannot acclimate very many elements, only around 21 of the 91 on the periodic table. So this is why, beginning in 1962, NASA started investigating transforming humans into cyborgs, part humans, part machines, so that we could venture out into space. And again, the idea is that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth for many, many thousands, if not millions of years, and it's quite possible that they too were not fully flesh and blood beings. They were either cyborgs or they were ephemeral beings. They were light beings who could take on physical manifestation. But in addition to that is this idea that it's more practical for any civilization, be it human or a humanoid civilization coming from outside our solar system or even outside our galaxy, maybe even outside of our universe, to instead send robotic probes first and then contemplate sending humanoid visitors. As Dr. Dyson explained, Astro Chicken would be a 1 kilogram spacecraft unlike any before it. It would be a creation of the intersection of biology, artificial intelligence, and modern microelectronics, a blend of organic and electronic components. And again, this is exactly what NASA began researching in 1962 when it started thinking about sending men into space, and women, of course. They instantly realized, and it could have been because of the Roswell crash in 1947, when we not only recovered a crashed vehicle, allegedly, but also non-organic pilots. And we would have had firsthand knowledge right then that, at least in this particular instance, the Roswell crash, the beings were humanoid, but they were not strictly flesh and blood. They were hybrid beings, a blend of organic and electronic components. And this is what NASA is saying we must become as well. As I ventured further into this research, my show research returned me to my 2006 book, Starwalkers and the Dimension of the Blessed, in which I decoded ancient Egyptian star walking or stargate metaphysics, specifically the Edfu creation texts, which are a creation story, a Genesis story recorded on the walls of the Temple of Horus at Edfu. And what I did then is I compared the Edfu creation text to the story of Atlantis. To me, the similarities were glaring and obvious. And this is a kind of a pioneering effort on my part to look back and say, well, wait a minute. Plato said he got the story of Atlantis from his cousin, Solon, who had been traveling in Egypt, but nobody knows where he got the idea. When I looked at the Edfu text, which essentially says this: bird-like beings, beings of light, came to Earth from the cosmos. They laid a cosmic egg in Egypt that grew around it an advanced civilization, an island civilization. These advanced bird-like light beings brought with them technology. The text specifically described a relic that helped them to found this advanced civilization, this advanced island civilization. But then there was a cataclysm. The island civilization was destroyed. But before the destruction of this island civilization, the sagely beings had secreted away in hiding places advanced technology, the relic they spoke of in the text. They retrieved the relic and restarted civilization, the island of the egg, as they called it. Now, when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, well, this sounds exactly like Plato's story of Atlantis, especially when you combine it with Edgar Cayce's conception of Atlantis as this super advanced civilization that had a fire crystal at its center, a pillar of light, that suffered a cataclysm, sunk in the waters of the night. But priestly sages had advanced knowledge of this impending cataclysm. They stashed away relics and records of this civilization, which they retrieved after the water subsided and restarted civilization. So what I went out on a limb to say is that I'm proposing that the ancient Egyptian Edfu texts could have been the source material for Plato's story. And so let's take a look at what we're going to see here as we go, rather, is we're going to take a look at that story in more detail and show you how beat for beat this story of these advanced bird beings with their technology coming to Earth sounds very much like what Freeman Dyson proposed with his Astro Chicken idea. As we develop this story, we're going to see that the ancient Egyptians clearly spoke of this advanced civilization coming from the stars as having what we might today describe as artificial intelligence and technology that we today call nanotechnology that kickstarted originally the civilization of Atlantis. Now, this is a really important story because we all want to know, was the story of Atlantis true, which many people believe it was? And is there a hall of records that we can recover that will help us to avert some kind of a future cataclysm and perhaps will return us to an advanced state of consciousness? National Geographic followed me to the Temple of Horus at Edfu in 2006, where the texts were written. And they tried to do a real hatchet job on this story, doing everything they could to destroy the connection between Plato and the Temple of Horus at Edfu. But anybody watching the program, Atlantis, Is It Real, was its title, can see through the veil and see that they were really kind of alarmed that Plato's story of Atlantis has got some real source material here at the Temple of Horus at Edfu. So as I said, when I revisited my work on the EdFu texts for Ancient Aliens, I was shocked and excited to discover just how this story perfectly matches with the concept of self-replicating, artificially intelligent robot seeder ships that are presently being proposed as a way to explore and colonize the galaxy. So my question that we're going to explore in this presentation is this: are the EdFu texts and the tale of the star seeding of the Earth by this bird tribe, as described in these texts, actually the story of an ancient artificially intelligent probe or Genesis device? And as I share, I think we have to seriously consider this possibility. My thought stream concerning the possibility of ancient alien robotic probes, especially artificially intelligent probes, originally began flowing with this comment from futurist and blogger George Dvorsky. He says, forget about generation ships. These would be ships where people would spend hundreds of years traveling the stars to arrive at a neighboring planet, even light years, right? So forget about generation ships, suspended animation, or the sudden appearance of a wormhole, he said. The most likely way for aliens to visit us, whatever their motive, is by sending robotic probes. And here's how swarms of self-replicating astro chickens could someday rule the galaxy. Another thought that fed this stream came from Wikipedia, noting that back in the late 1940s, the Hungarian mathematician John von Neumann wondered if it might be possible to design a non-biological system that could replicate itself in a cellular automata environment in space. Von Neumann rigorously studied the concept of self-replicating machines that he called universal assemblers, and which are often referred to as von Neumann machines. While von Neumann never applied his work to the idea of spacecraft specifically, Freeman Dyson did. Nanotechnologist writer Eric Drexler did. So did Ralph Merkle and Robert Freitas, who all took his idea and applied it to exactly that concept. The blue spheres that we see here could be an example of a design for such a robotic seeder ship that is self-replicating, that's out in the cosmos, that is looking for a world to inhabit. If one of these self-replicating probes finds evidence of primitive life or a primitive low-level culture, it might be programmed to lie dormant, silently observe, attempt to make contact, or even interfere with or guide the evolution of life in some way. And I'm going to show you that this is exactly what the ancient Egyptians said happened in their creation tale from EdFu. While Astro Chicken has the common traits of self-replication, exploration, and communication with its home base, Dyson conceived the Astro Chicken to explore and operate within our own planetary system and not explore interstellar space, although Drexler and others think that that's a real possibility. Astro Chicken would be launched by a conventional spacecraft into space, like an egg being laid into space. Astro Chicken could then hatch and start growing a solar energy collector. The solar collector would feed an ion drive engine that would power the craft. And once Astro Chicken entered a planet's vicinity, it would collect material from the moons and rings of the planet, taking in nutrients. This is a 1982 NASA artist conception of a self-growing lunar factory. Oh, excuse me, sorry. This is an artist conception by Dana Augustine, actually, of Plato's Atlantis, at least as described in Plato's story, with the concentric rings representing the canals of Atlantis and the fiery center representing the pillar of fire that Casey said was at the center of the Atlantean civilization. Here is the 1982 NASA artist conception of a self-growing lunar factory. I hope you appreciate a little bit of the humor here. You can see the diagrams are strikingly similar, leading one to wonder, hey, maybe there's more to this than we've actually given credit for in the past. At the center of the Astro Chicken idea is this solar collector. And that's what we're told was at the center of the Atlantean civilization, was this fire crystal that was a collector of solar energy. So there's an interesting correspondence that we're already seeing here between the idea of the astro chicken and the story of Atlantis. Oxford-based philosopher Nick Bostrom got in on the act here and discussed the idea that future powerful superintelligences will create efficient, cost-effective space travel and interstellar von Neumann probes. This is how they're going to, and we are going to ultimately colonize the solar system. Bostrom believes there's a strong possibility that we are actually living in an artificially intelligent computer simulation as well. That's a very powerful subject that we need to get into at another time. But for now, I'm just stating that Bostrom is one of these guys that's on board with this understanding of our future in artificial intelligence. Yet another variant on the idea of the self-replicating starship, or cosmic egg ship, if you will, is that of the cedar ship. Such starships or space birds might store the genetic patterns of life forms from their home world, perhaps even of the species which created it. Keep this idea in mind, because we're going to see the exact same thing once again described by the ancient Egyptians. Upon finding a habitable exoplanet, or even one that might be terraformed, it would try to replicate such life forms either from stored embryos or from stored information using molecular nanotechnology to build zygotes with varying genetic information from local raw materials. This is another idea we're going to see in the EdFood text. These light beings replicating themselves utilizing the local materials of Earth. Such space birds might be terraforming vessels, preparing colony worlds or nests for later colonization by other vessels, or should they be programmed to recreate, raise, and educate individuals of the species that created it, self-replicating colonizers themselves. Cedar ships would be a suitable alternative to generation ships as a way to colonize worlds too distant to travel to in one lifetime. And again, this is important for us to acknowledge here, because for maybe the past couple of decades, with the work of Eric von Däniken, Zecharia Sitchin, we've been entertained with this idea of the generation ship notion, that actual flesh and blood extraterrestrials came to Earth from some far distant planet, Nibiru, for example, in this theory of Sitchin's. They would have come in a generation ship. Sitchin asked us to believe that the Anunnaki, when they came here 450,000 years ago, had reached the same level of technological advancement that we were at about 20 years ago. He believed that Sitchin proposed the Anunnaki putted around the cosmos in rocket ships, rocket-propelled ships. I seriously doubt that, at least based on this knowledge now, that if they had just waited another 20 years on their hypothetical technological evolution timeline, they too would have come upon artificial intelligence and this concept of cedar ships. So it makes more sense to me that the Anunnaki, when they came, were also utilizing this self-replication type of technology. We'll talk about that more later. Ultimately, what the Anunnaki would have been aware of as well is what we refer to as transhumanism. This idea that our flesh and blood bodies are too fragile to go into space, that we're going to have to transform, we're going to have to become transhumans. NASA in 1962 coined the term, or researchers rather, coined the term cyborg to describe a hybrid human and non-organic machine. Now we talk about dispensing with the body altogether. We talk about creating avatars and simulated realities. We talk about leaving the body behind and instead opting for mind uploading, transferring our personalities to another brain. We talk about time scanning. Detailed information from the past will become more available in this theory. Once time scanning is available, we will be able to resurrect people from the past by copying them to the future via mind uploading. This also brings into play the idea of parallel realities. Artificial realities will be constructed and inhabited by sentient life. Perhaps one day we'll wake up in a synthetic reality, like Nick Bostrom says, after having been copied to the future. Maybe we're already living in that world. My point here is that if you're the leader of the Anunnaki, Enki, you're not shooting your physical body around the cosmos in a tin can spaceship. You're going to send a copy of yourself, and you're going to self-replicate some form of a form, probably a humanoid form, when you get to the world you're intent on colonizing, in this case, Earth. And then you're going to have your mind downloaded into that new physical form that you'll walk around in. That's the theory anyway. Mind uploading research is ongoing, and scientists believe may achieve results in this century, perhaps even in the next decade. And once it's available, everyone will be able to live indefinitely in non-biological bodies and make backup copies of themselves that you can shoot through space, that you can shoot through time, whatever it is you want to do. Some of these ideas are in my free ebook, The Skingularity is Near, The Next Human, the Perfect Rainbow Light Body, and the Technology of Human Transcendence, where I describe in detail just how advanced our technology is in terms of creating these non-biological bodies and merging our flesh with technology. If you go to my website, williamhenry.net, and click on The Skingularity, you can send me an email and I'll make sure you get a free copy of the book, as well as a recent hour-and-a-half-long presentation that I gave on this incredible situation that we find ourselves in. For now, I want to take you back to Edfu. I want to take you to Egypt. I want to take you to the temple where the ancient Egyptians wrote these creation texts that describe the arrival of these bird-like beings with this technology that laid an egg that formed this original advanced island civilization. The Temple of Horus is devoted to the sun god Horus. It was built around 250 BC. But sources tell us that the original sources for the story are much older than the temple. In other words, the story was printed on the temple in 250 BC, but it's based on much older stories, in fact. When we go to Edfu on my Stargate Egypt cruises, when my wife Claire and I take groups to Egypt, we always include Edfu. It's part of our Nile cruise. And it's a truly wondrous experience to get on the Nile. The Nile is like a mirror. It also has a memory. It remembers when, and it can take you there. And it feels like you're stepping back in time, and you're on a river that's been important to humanity for at least 5,000 years, probably 10,000 years. You think about all the people that sailed the Nile before us, and the knowledge that they possessed, and the understanding of the cosmos that they possessed, and what they were trying to encode in their temples. Foremost among these temples is, of course, the Temple of Horus at Edfu. Built during the Ptolemaic era, these are the generals who followed on after Alexander the Great conquered the world. They were deeply interested in resurrection mysteries, immortality, alchemy. They built the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. They also built a collection of Ptolemaic temples that includes Edfu, Karnak, Philae, Kamumbo, Esna, all of which encode the ascension mysteries and resurrection mysteries of the ancient Egyptians on the temple walls. This particular temple was started in 237 BC. It was completed in 57 BC. According to legends carved on its stone walls, the current temple replaced an older structure designed in accordance with the divine plan that dropped down from heaven to earth. Another of the Ptolemaic temples is Dendera. And when we visit Dendera, you're literally standing on the roof of the former temple that was once there. Ancient Egypt is a layer cake. And here at Edfu, they're clearly telling us that this temple is the latest iteration of what has been there. In the 1800s, David Roberts visited Edfu and made these astonishing paintings, very beautiful paintings of Edfu, mostly covered in sand. Today, fortunately, the sand is clear, and we can walk around the Temple of Horus, this temple of light, this ascension temple, and explore its many mysteries firsthand. We see the winged disc above the temple entrance, the symbol of ascension, the symbol of resurrection, Sitchin proclaimed it the symbol of the Anunnaki as well. Good possibility. It's devoted to Horus, the god of light, who is the son, of course, of Isis and Osiris. He is the reincarnation of Osiris. And here on the facade of the Temple of Horus, we see Horus, and he holds in his hand his mini-me, if you will, his Horus device, some kind of a handheld device that looks sort of like a combination of a serpent and a bird. Horus is the falcon-headed god, the hawk-headed god, and he's very often portrayed as blue. So he's actually a blue bird, or a term that many people are using these days, blue avian. Now, I'm not totally familiar with the concept of the blue avians as being promoted presently. I've surveyed some of the materials when they initially were presented. I was a bit surprised not to see a reference to Horus as one of the original blue avians. And so this is either suggesting that Horus is not part of the current group of blue avians, or it's just simply not part of this group at all. I'm going to have to get clarification from the promoters of the blue avian theory to see if they actually include Horus, because they have not mentioned him at all, which suggests to me that perhaps there is no connection. But the fact is that Horus at Edfu, as well as at Dendera, as we will see momentarily, is portrayed as a blue bird being, a hawk-headed or falcon-headed bird being. So as we're wandering around the Temple of Horus, we're starting to get a feel for this temple. We're seeing some of the interesting etchings in the stone wall, including the Seth device, which looks sort of like a velociraptor to some people. We see the incredible granite statue of Horus that guards the entranceway to the temple. Favorite photo op for a lot of people. We enter into the inside of the temple, which mimics the original island of creation, the original Garden of Eden. These tall pillars going into the ceiling actually unite heaven and earth. That's their symbolic purpose. So we're actually wandering in now into the original island of creation, if you will, that linked heaven and earth. And now we're aiming ourselves towards the Holy of Holies of the Temple of Horus, where we see a model that many people propose as the original model for the biblical Ark of the Covenant. We see the Ark device. We see the Ship of Eternity, also called the Ark of the Millions of Years, that is mounted to it with the face of Horus on the front of the boat. It's a really powerful, energetic spot in the Temple of Horus, the Holy of Holies. We're in it now, and you see that this massive granite chest that's behind it that would have had statues within it. Probably weighs, it's somewhere between 100 and 150 tons. It's absolutely massive, just total masterpiece sitting right in front of us. But what we really want to focus on here at Edfu are the Edfu texts, the creation texts, as they're also called, the building texts, which were originally housed in this little alcove here, which was originally a library. And so these texts couldn't have been very big, and there's tiny little shelves inside this alcove. And it gives you the idea that maybe these texts were like etched on small stones originally. According to the legends etched onto this book in stone, the Temple of Horus replaced an original structure, as I said, that was dropped down from heaven. The first temple came into existence at the beginning of the world. And it's highly probable that the texts, these Edfu texts, etched upon these walls are far more ancient than the Edfu temple upon which they're printed. The Edfu texts, as they are known, are largely unknown and were only recently translated. We're going to discuss the work of Dr. Yves Raymond here in a moment, who translated these works only in the 1970s. This doesn't mean that all their contents are unfamiliar just because these texts are largely unknown. As we're going to see, the Edfu texts tell a story that is hauntingly familiar. Here, we read about the origin of a primeval resting place of the falcon and life in a primeval domain of the falcon. These texts relate a tradition that says the spot of creation, the island of creation, was a field of reeds where divine beings resembling falcons came to earth. This is the arrival of the bird tribe, the Avian tribe. And at Edfu, we see plenty of examples of Horus interacting with the Pharaoh, transmitting the key of life, transmitting other knowledge, including the knowledge of perfuming to the Pharaoh. Here, the Pharaoh offers strips of linen to Horus. These strips of linen symbolize his attainment of the resurrection body, the ascension body, or the body of light, the same body that Horus possesses as well, by the way. In another example, we see the Pharaoh being anointed or anointing with the two streams of heavenly water with Horus and Isis. The name Horus stems from the Egyptian preposition hr, or hair, or her, meaning above. It's because Horus soared above like a falcon, but also because he came from above. He's portrayed as humanoid, blue, and with a hawk or falcon head. These particular images that we're looking at here come from the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, where we see Horus as a blue bird being enthroned. He holds the Set device with the head that again resembles the pterodactyl. We see the Pharaoh, one of the Ptolemies, offering the image of the gateway to Horus, who's enthroned once again on his key of life throne. You note that he's blue. This means that he's actually transparent. He's invisible, like the sky is thought to be transparent. If you can see through it, you can see the stars. If you can see through Horus's transparent blue body, you can see his star body. So at the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, we'll see the pharaohs standing before, making offerings to Isis/Hathor, and also Horus, the blue Avian god, the light being. Horus wears stars and feathers to reinforce the idea that he is a star being, a celestial being, and the feathers indicate his ability to soar into the cosmos. He has a winged serpent patch on his shoulder. This identifies him as a winged serpent or a seraphim, the highest order of angels. We're going to come back to this connection later. For now, we're just making a note that the winged serpent is present on the shoulder patch of Horus, making the connection to this highest order of angelic beings. The winged serpent logo I propose is actually the logo of the bird tribe, the winged serpents, or the Avian tribe or bird tribe. Also at Dendera, we see the bluebird Horus on a wormhole or lotus boat. This is the ship of eternity, the Ark of the Millions of Years, as it's also called. One of my contributions to the modern study of Egyptology is to note that the way the ancient Egyptians portrayed the lotus boat of the gods, the deities and the stars, matches precisely the way modern science portrays a wormhole. So I put two and two together and came up with this revolutionary take that, in fact, the gods at Dendera and elsewhere are sailing the cosmos on wormholes. They're light beings who have the ability to open portals or gateways in space-time and travel the stars through wormholes. The interesting thing about this is that it points us in the direction of just exactly how advanced these beings must have been. To open wormholes with their consciousness suggests that they are super advanced beings. And in fact, they are inviting us to follow them on this path of ascension and recover this ancient Egyptian Stargate metaphysics, which is what the Eye of Horus, the blue Eye of Horus, represents. And in this instance here, we see Thoth or Tahuti, the ancient Egyptian god of divine magic or alchemy, the bird-headed Thoth or Tahuti, who is here adoring or worshiping the Eye of Horus on the ceiling at Dendera. And as usual, he's on his wormhole-shaped lotus craft, the ship of eternity, or the Ark of the Millions, called it. Is it possible that the ancient Egyptians knew about wormholes as their artwork and text suggests? I believe it is. And this synchronicity points to a question: which came first, the shape of the celestial ship, the chicken, or the man-made earthly ship, the egg? Why is it that the way the ancient Egyptians created their earthly ships, they made them shaped exactly like the shape of a wormhole? I think that the U shape of the wormhole is the primordial symbol, and it is a representative of the consciousness technology of the bird tribe who brought this technology to Earth. Since 2004, I've been cataloging images of Osiris and the other ancient Egyptian gods star walking or surfing on this boat as regenerated or born again beings of light, star beings. And I've been comparing them to modern depictions of star boats scientists call wormholes or stargates that enable travel through the galaxy and even to parallel universes. As we see here, the parallels are striking. And it suggests to me that this is one method or mode of transport that these beings use as they're traveling through the cosmos. And so very often you will see them, as we're looking here at Dendera, sitting on their feathered thrones, which are called Merkaba thrones. They've got their resurrection sticks in their hands. They've got their keys of life in their hand, and they are good to go in terms of interdimensional or cosmic travel. They can go from Earth to to point B in the cosmos or in another universe at the speed of thought. And so this is just some backstory here about the level of technology that is potentially portrayed on the temple walls in ancient Egypt. This wormhole-shaped boat has been sitting there for over 2,000 years. And perhaps there was a metaphysical time lock on it, waiting for the moment when we develop the consciousness to be able to conceive of wormholes. And for whatever reason, when I was first researching Egypt, ancient Egypt in the early 2000s, I made this connection and it stuck. So now when you go to the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, especially your spiritually minded guides are going to tell you to look up on the ceiling and see the gods traveling on their wormhole boats. I appreciate them very much picking up on this idea and trying to expand people's minds. So here we see a pharaoh in a blue sphere on his ark shape or his lotus boat, his wormhole boat, the Ark of the Millions of Years. Above the blue sphere, we see the Egyptian hieroglyph for heaven filled with stars. And it indicates that this figure in this blue sphere is traveling the stars as a celestial being. And I'm proposing that this is another method of travel that these beings utilize as to travel the cosmos. So now, let's come back and let's take a look specifically at the work of Dr. Yves Raymond, who is the professor from the University of Manchester, or Manchester University in England, who first translated the ancient Egyptian Edfu texts. She wrote a book called The Mythic Origin of the Egyptian Temple. And she says that these mysterious texts contain cosmological records that begin with a picture of a primeval island where the gods or divine beings were believed to have lived first. Among the titles included in the Edfu collection are the specification of the mounds of the early primeval age, the sacred book of the early primeval age of the gods, and offering of the lotus. She says that the mythological picture and cosmological picture these creation texts paint is complex, but it's absolutely technological as well. And this is one of the reasons why it's so complex. According to Egyptian cosmology, all life began with the emergence of a sacred island out of the primeval waters of Nun, the cosmic waters. The Egyptians said a mound emerged from these primordial waters and became the resting place of the creator of the world. It is also thought of as the nucleus, the egg from which all creation on earth grew, and a lotus emitted radiance from this place. The island of the egg, as it was called, was surrounded by this primeval water. The Edfu texts tell us that by the edge of this lake was a field of reeds, a sacred domain also named the homeland. Throughout the Edfu text, we learn about the ancestors, the original divine dwellers of the field of reeds, the island of the egg. The ancestors were responsible for bringing into existence all that exists. These are celestial beings. These are star beings. On the island, we're told, was a high hill. It was on the high hill that these formless beings shaped their physical bodies. They were regarded as self-created divine beings. This place is the ground or field of the ancestors, according to the Edfu text. Flinders Petrie put forth his theory that the magnificent and long-lived civilization of Egypt was founded by a super race in antiquity. This has long been known. In the early 1920s, 1930s, Egyptologists became aware that Egypt was a legacy civilization from super advanced beings. This became known as the dynastic race theory, and it alleges that in the pre-dynastic era, before 3200 BC, Egypt was invaded by a technologically superior group of elite foreigners who Petrie believed came from Mesopotamia. Other writers can tell you that they're going to make a connection not just to Sumeria or Mesopotamia, but to the Anunnaki as this ancestor race or this builder race, super advanced race that came from the stars and originally founded Egyptian civilization. In the 1930s, or by the 1930s, well-respected and highly credentialed Egyptologists had adopted the super race theory and continued to gather additional evidence to support it. That is, up until World War II, it was the dominant academic viewpoint. And then Hitler came on the scene, and after his disastrous legacy, any talk of a master race, a super race, of Atlanteans, of extraterrestrials, began to be viewed in a negative light. And Egyptology went into sort of a, call it a dark age, if you will, where they started to dismiss any talk of advanced super races in ancient Egypt, especially those that came from the stars. Petrie referred to this invading force as the Falcon tribe. And the name of their capital means the city of the Falcon. And their descendants became the Horus kings of Egypt. So what we're going to piece together here is this recollection or this understanding that the Falcon tribe is this super advanced race. But what Dr. Raymond makes us aware of is that this advanced race were originally formless light beings who came from the stars and took on human form when they founded the island civilization the ancient Egyptian Edfu texts describe. This belief that all emerged from water, as the Edfu texts say, is highly significant and was actually validated by modern science in 2005. Results from particle accelerator, particle collider experiments suggest that the universe behaved like a liquid in its earliest moments, as opposed to a fiery gas as long thought to have characterized the first microseconds of existence. Space-time may be fluid. And the question is, how did the ancient Egyptians know this? Probably through visionary experiences walking the stars, or more likely because the ancestor race who came from the stars told them this. In 2015, we get more validation that the universe was originally watery in form. Science, the Department of Energy Office of Science User Facility, with 1,000 collaborators from around the world, have shown that this primordial soup, known as the quark gluon plasma, flows like a nearly friction-free perfect fluid. It's like 99.9% viscous too, which allows light to pass through it easily. So we're getting validation here that the ancient Egyptians knew what they were talking about when they proposed this ancestor race. Had told them that everything emerged originally out of water. Scientists now think the universe was initially a thick, hot soup that tracked light. About 350,000 years after the Big Bang, the theoretical beginning of it all, some 13.7 billion years ago, things cleared and an imprint of the earlier conditions was left on the entire cosmos. Scientists previously detected this imprint as the cosmic microwave background. This field is everywhere in the sky and packs important clues about the structure of the early universe. Something similar should have happened with sound, says Harvard scientist Daniel Eisenstein, who's now at the University of Arizona. The early universe, he proposes, rang with the sound of countless cosmic bells, which filled the primordial darkness with ripples like the surface of a pond pounded by stones. The wavefronts later served as spawning grounds for galaxies, his research reveals. And down here in the lower right, he shows the primordial sound wave, now 500 million light years across. So we're getting some validation here that the EdFu texts have some very critical information in them for us. In returning to EdFu, we learn that in the island of the egg was found a high hill, which sounds like a place where matter was piled up. It was on the high hill that a group of nameless deities who existed before the origin of the earth came into manifestation. Raymond notes that these divine creator beings seem to have lived in the island of the egg in an insubstantial form. These shapeless creative powers were described by the Egyptians as the most aged ones and the lords of the light. They begat themselves, says Raymond, without father and mother. So these are self-created, or are they self-replicated beings? We're starting to develop the picture here that these formless beings are very much like the mind-uploaded beings we described a moment ago that are now recreating themselves using the local materials of Earth to now take on substantial form and to act as a force of evolution in earthly affairs. A similar description of having no mother or father and being self-created is given to the biblical king Melchizedek, the priest king of Salem, who was born without mother or father and who performed the first manna and wine ceremony that was later adopted by Jesus, who is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, thereby connecting himself with this ancient order of light beings. Clearly, we are asked to believe that the first creator beings were immaculately conceived from out of the blue or out of nothing, a la the Egyptian creator god Ptah and Melchizedek, and later, of course, Jesus. The lords of light were regarded as self-created divine beings and are described as the primeval ones. They're the star children, or the and. According to Raymond's interpretation of the EdFu text, these formless beings shaped their solid physical bodies out of a substance produced by the fertilization of a substance called BNNT, bunit. While it's not certain exactly what the Egyptians were talking about, Raymond speculates that the term Bennett seems to describe the place in which the mystic union between the primeval ones and the cosmic waters of noon occurred. She hints that the newborn Earth might have been imagined as an island or embryo of this substance, which emerged from the waters of noon, the island of the egg. So we're talking about, here again, these beings coming from another region in space-time and creating or forming their earthly bodies out of local materials, and apparently also having the ability to regain their cosmic consciousness in these bodies. They perhaps have uploaded their consciousness into some form, shot it through the cosmos, and are now reforming their bodies out of the local materials and then re-downloading their consciousness into these new bodies. Apparently, these beings were thought to have acted first in somewhat insubstantial form while creating the island of the egg. After the substance was brought into existence by the fertilization of the bunit matter and had its manifestation in the emergence of the island, then it was possible for the primeval powers, the original creators, to undergo metamorphosis and assume a physical form. So this is our seedership idea. where it goes into a new world and goes out and gathers materials that it can replicate itself with to create a physical form for itself. And this is exactly what the Edfu texts are telling us that these ancient light beings did, projecting themselves into our world, harvesting some kind of a substance, perhaps coming some of it from the cosmos, others of it from the earth, and now forming their physical bodies. In my AI scheme, the beings self-replicated themselves from nanobots. As an alternative, I'm thinking they may even have entered into human bodies they created by a divine power. This is alluded to in the Sumerian creation stories when the gods fashioned the human body. In ancient Egypt, we also learn of Ptah, who fashioned the human body, so that then the gods could enter into the bodies of these newly created beings. So I'm highly intrigued by the Edfu recollections and rememberings concerning these primeval ones, particularly since ancient American oral tradition from Tennessee, where I live, retold by Cherokee wisdom keeper Diane Iweho, says that formless thought beings called TLA beings or Tula beings wrote a sound wave from the Pleiades star cluster through a hole in space in East Tennessee and created the Cherokee. And then all of the rest of the humans then are dream children of these angels or elemental forces who came from the Pleiades. So this is another example of a creation mythology where we're talking about advanced beings projecting themselves into our world and taking on physical incarnation. To me, self-conception is the same as self-replication. The island of the egg is starting to sound like an artificially intelligent replicator space bird ship or a creation or genesis egg laid by one. The Egyptians imagined that after the first phases of creation were completed, the primeval ones, these light being ancestors, lived in the vicinity of a pool that contained a lotus, and within it the sun god. Ramon says that this pool was undoubtedly a reed pool standing on the marginal land of the island. The Edfu evidence describes it only as an area, the edge of reeds, and this is why the reed became such a holy symbol for the ancient Egyptians. It bears the name Elevated Seat of the God. This seat is pictured as a jed or tet pillar that was made of a bundle of reeds. Ramon hypothesizes this represented the actual spot or nucleus of creation, the place where the divine powers fertilized this bunnet matter, the embryo of the earth. And so what we're looking at here is an example from the Egyptian Book of the Dead of one of these tet pillars with the keys of life hanging from the arms. And also it's upholding the Egyptian symbol for vibration and also possibly for soul as well. The jed pillar or tet pillar is a type of world tree. It represents stability, continuity, and regeneration. The festival of the raising of the Jed dates back more than 5,000 years to pre-dynastic times, as does the Book of the Dead, which identifies the Jed as both the backbone of Osiris and the support or backbone of the universe. This is the key relic of these ancestor beings. This is perhaps some kind of like a nanotechnology machine in my AI scheme. It is in fact a solar collector, as evidenced here by this depiction from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where Isis and Nephthys are adoring or receiving energy from this tet pillar, and the Anchor key of life is attached to it, and it is uplifting or upholding the sun portal or the sun gate. So it's a solar collector. It's kind of interesting to us, especially in light when we go back to our NASA conception of the self-growing lunar factory that would manifest itself out of nanotechnology. At the center of it would be the solar canopy or the solar collector, the power source for this entire operation. So it's kind of fascinating that we're seeing a correspondence here once again with this idea of the self-replicating laboratory with what we find in the Edfu texts. The name of the god who sat on this pillar or perch in the midst of the fields of the reeds was Pien, or this one. Interestingly, the Greek myth of Pan says Pan invented the reed pipe. And remember, the reed is the holy symbol of these beings in the Edfu text. Pneuma is another word for the Holy Spirit. That's a PN-based word, so it's interesting correspondence there as well. Two symbols are mentioned in connection to this being PN, the member of the progenitor and the image of the arm, very technological sounding. These might have been actual objects or technologies used by these beings in the creation of the island Earth. And what we're told in the Edfu text is that in between the stages of creation or Genesis, first the creation of the primary matter of the Earth, then the shaping of this matter, it appears that this technology, or these two technologies, remained on site. They were key components utilized in the physical manifestation of these beings. And this could be why this symbol is tied to the concept of resurrection. It's the ladder to heaven. It's the means perhaps by which these beings descended to the earth plane, and also the means by which they could ascend back to the heavenly planes. Another epithet of this PN god, the overlord of the Jed pillar or Tet pillar, indicates that this one might have been the ruler of this field of reeds. This divine being can be imagined as resting on the Jed pillar of reed in the midst of the pool of the waters of creation, just like the sun god on the lotus in the Egyptian tale from Heliopolis. The Egyptians definitely imagined this as an actual spot or dot of real estate, and imagine that the Tet pillar was an actual device or technology that was present at the creation. It's the original tree of life, if you will, in the original Garden of Eden. This example here is from Philae, and it's a key example because it shows the arms, perhaps the arms of the progenitor, lifting up the symbol for vibration as well as the soul, and above it is the loop symbol for eternity or resurrection, connecting these symbols once again. We see the same thing here from Deir el-Bahari, this time in full color, where we see the wavy lines symbolic of frequency or vibration or even a captured soul, and above it the symbol for eternity. We'll just go through a few more examples here of the numerous representations of the Tet pillar that we see on the temple walls in Egypt, all connecting the Tet pillar with the idea ultimately of resurrection, but ultimately also telling us that it is the ladder or stairway to heaven. This Tet pillar, the Edfu text tells us, was protected by two other entities described as Hathor and another falcon named Nefer, who is referred to as the sanctified ruler and the ruler of the wing. We also see the Tet pillar here at Abydos with the face of Hathor, the goddess Hathor, inside of it. The name Hathor is given to a divine being that dwelt in the dead pillar or Tet pillar, and Raymond supposed it was possible that Hathor functioned as a protector. In fact, Hathor is interpreted as a deity who repulses the evildoer from the mansion of God. And at Abydos, we actually see her face on another variation of the Tet pillar, as if she is housed within this pillar. She's definitely a divine being. She's an extraterrestrial goddess who may have in fact taken manifestation through this pillar that in this instance highly resembles some kind of an antenna-like device. At Hathor's temple of love and joy at Dendera, Isis and Horus are both portrayed as blue bird people or humans with blue feather cloaks, just like Hathor, indicating that she's also a member of this tribe. Back at Abydos, we see additional examples of the Tet pillar here being set upright in this case as a symbol of resurrection. This is the king Seti who is taking the Tet pillar to Isis, and then ultimately will set the Tet pillar upright and offer new clothes to it as a symbol of his resurrection. In this example here, Ptah, the Egyptian god of technology who came from Sirius, is standing in front of the Tet pillar, this backbone, this technology that we're told was present at the island of the egg. The Tet pillars are also featured in a key hieroglyph of Osiris, the Egyptian god of resurrection, and are worth taking a look at here. What we see in this hieroglyph is that the Tet pillars flank the Egyptian symbol for a gateway. And you will see, as we see here on the right, Osiris standing in a gateway that is flanked by these Tet pillars. And the idea is that we think that they're either spinning or they're in fact vibrating, indicating that there's some sort of a sound function to these pillars. The Tet pillars are part of a collection or a kit of tools that form the hieroglyph for what is called the head of Osiris, which is another ancient Egyptian technology that we see featured on the walls of the Temple of Seti at Abydos. The fully assembled Osiris device, as I call it, is on the wall of the Osiris Chapel at the Temple of Seti I at Abydos. And here's what it looks like. When you take the gateway symbol, the portal symbol that's flanked by the Tet pillars, and you put the serpent levitating on the pole on top of it, you get what is called the Osiris device, which was an important device in the story of Osiris's resurrection. This device actually represents the resurrected Osiris. And it suggests that this, in fact, is some sort of a resurrection technology, an ascension machine that was known by the ancient Egyptians and recovered at the time of King Seti, who immediately followed upon the time of Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, and the time of Moses. It was actually Ramses I who was the one who originally placed that depiction on the wall at the Temple of Seti. And what we see here is Horus and Thoth, the two members of the bird tribe, on either side of the head of Osiris, as it's called, this spinning resurrection device, indicating that this is one of their tools or appliances, if you will. It's possible, at least in my theory, that these ancestor gods, these divine formless light beings, Thoth, Horus, Hathor, were the ones who originally brought this technology to Earth, and it became foundational to the ancient Egyptians. Here in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, on the left-hand side, we see Horus standing in front of the Osiris device. He's got his back, his shoulders touching Isis, who's also tending the Osiris device. This is clearly their technology. And what the Edfu texts are telling us is that this could have been one of the original relics brought by these divine light beings when they originally colonized Earth. If so, we have to begin to think about it in terms of artificial intelligence and nanotechnology, that this is some sort of a genesis device or a creation machine that they originally utilized when they made their transformed their formless light beings into physical manifestation. It would also have the ability, as we are told in the Egyptian myths, to take the physical body and transform it into a formless light being form or a resurrected body. This is the Osirion temple. It's about 12,000 years old. It's behind the Temple of Seti at Abydos. We're looking at the exterior wall of the temple, actually. And I'm drawing your attention to this because this temple, the Osirion, is believed, as I said, to be at least 12,000 years old and is considered to be an Atlantean temple. Its significance is that it's called the Tomb of Osiris. And what I'm asking you to consider is that this could have been one of the storage places or resting places for the Osiris device that was secreted away before the cataclysm of Atlantis. And then it was rediscovered at the time of Moses, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and King Seti. Our attention is drawn to the inscriptions on the exterior wall of the Temple of Seti, which is actually the interior wall of the Osirion. What we see is the Tet pillar on the lower register, and above it is the Osiris device, the two technologies that are referenced in the Edfu texts as being present at the original creation. So these are, in my terminology, the relics of this island civilization, and could well be what they are referring to as a Genesis device. Now, the thing about it is that this symbolism of the serpent levitating on a pole is key and central to our story. The reason why is because this is exactly what we see in the Garden of Eden story. The serpent in the tree of life is the original Genesis story, where Adam and Eve encounter the serpent and receive the wisdom of this serpent in the Garden of Eden. It's clear that the symbolism of the Osiris device precisely matches that of the serpent in the tree. They're the same thing. Moses most certainly apprehended this symbolism. In fact, he lifted the serpent of healing in the wilderness and put it on a pole. This is exactly the same thing that we see in the Osiris device or the Genesis device symbolism. So this is telling me that Moses must have been aware of this symbolism and its meaning originally. I believe that Moses actually knew the ultimate secrets of the Osiris device or the Genesis device, and he recognized that it's in fact the same thing as the Ark of the Covenant. The symbols that we see in the Ark of the Covenant, the rod of enlightenment, the tablets of the law, the box, the golden box of the Ark of the Covenant, when assembled, form the Osiris device or the Genesis device, as I'm terming it here. So what we're seeing here is that Moses must have been training at the Temple of Seti at Abydos when he learned this wisdom. And he must have known that this device probably had its origins in the pre-flood era. I'm suggesting going all the way back to the origins, the time of origin, when these divine light beings, the bird tribe, brought this technology to Earth. What makes me sure about this, or gives me additional food for thought to connect this Genesis device with the bird tribe, and here we see the correspondence of the symbolism. We see the rod of Aaron is the pillar, the two tablets of the law are the two tablets up on top of the Genesis device. The ark-like platform is the Ark of the Covenant. So this is the fully assembled device. But the thing is that when Moses lifted the serpent of healing in the wilderness, in some cases, this is referred to as not just a serpent of healing, but a winged serpent of healing. The Hebrew definition of the serpent on a pole, or the term used for that, is the Nehushtan. The Nehushtan is, by definition, is the winged serpent. This is incredibly important to us because, as we have seen, the winged serpent is the logo or symbol of the bird tribe. It's the symbol of Horus. So this fundamentally connects this Genesis device with this bird tribe. It has their logo all over it, and it does the same thing that this device was said to have done in the Egyptian Edfu text, in their creation mythology. So what I'm suggesting to you is that these beings, this bird tribe, brought this technology to Earth, and that this is perhaps some sort of an AI or nanotechnology device that they utilized to gather in the earthly elements that formed their physical bodies. And when they leave this plane, as in the case of Osiris, their physical body formed by this device. Now, let's take this just one step forward. Another name for the winged serpents in Israelite tradition or Hebrew tradition are the seraphim angels. They are the highest order of angels. They are considered to be beings of pure light and pure love. And they are shown two ways. They are shown with blue wings or with red wings. The red wings are given to them because they are said to burn with the love of the Creator. The blue wings indicate that they are celestial beings. They are like in ancient Egypt, when you see a blue being, it indicates they are transparent or from the stars. So the winged serpents are the seraphim. And again, by definition, the word seraph means winged or feathered serpent. So these beings, these seraphim beings of the angelic tradition, are the same thing, or the same beings as the bird tribe of the ancient Egyptians, the Horus beings, the blue avians. They are the highest order of angels that come from the cosmos and came to Earth on a mission to accelerate the evolution of humanity. Scientifically speaking, these seraphim beings are type 4 beings on the Kardashev scale. They have the ability, they're totally ephemeral, they're non-physical beings. They can travel through stargates and wormholes, they can harness the power of a galaxy, and they can instantly materialize anything through thought. And they can travel at the speed of thought as well. So we're talking about a super advanced level of beings that precisely matches what we've been describing or examining in the Edfu texts in Egypt. They're also referred to as the fallen ones. These are the watcher angels. These are the beings that left the heavenly throne and descended and took on physical incarnation. They crossed a boundary of space-time, a forbidden boundary according to church teaching, and took on earthly manifestation or physical flesh and blood manifestation, and began to teach humans the secrets of heaven. So what we deduce from this astounding mythology is the idea that there was this original primeval island where two symbols or technology were found that represented immense creative powers. It was here that the world began and where formless entities, creator beings, lived. And what I'm proposing to you is that these creator beings, referred to as the bird tribe, Thoth, Horus, and others, are the seraphim angels of the Jewish or Israelite tradition. In her analysis of the Edfu Genesis tale, Ramon proposes there's clear evidence that during the first phase of creation, the island of the earth was first occupied by these divine beings from the field of the blessed. Then a second group of beings appears. These mysterious beings were led by a group of individuals known now as the dirty falcons, or sages. Among these new inhabitants is a mysterious figure named the Falcon, who is known as the Lord of the Perch and the Winged One. He leads a group called the crew of the Falcon, referred to as the eldest ones. This is where the Edfu texts then tell us of a cataclysm that destroyed the island of the egg. Something caused a mysterious sound eye to emerge from the island and create devastation. Yves Raymond believed the sound eye to be the center of the light that illuminates the island. And when it fell, complete darkness fell on the sacred domains. The sacred domains were destroyed, and after this death, there was a rebirth or resurrection. This is a clear correspondence to the Atlantis story of the destruction of this original island civilization. The Edfu texts tell of a battle with an enemy serpent that brought to a close the first period of creations, but the inhabitants fight the serpent, called the Great Leaping One, with a weapon known as the Sound Eye, which emerges from the island and actually creates the devastation. A second generation of sages then recovered the only relic to have survived the time of conflict, a single jed pillar located in the Field of Reeds, and now they resurrect the homeland. Raymond proposes that the Field of Reeds assumed a new function when the second period of existence of the island dawned. It became an ancestral territory. The name ancestors can, in this tradition, only apply to the original divine dwellers of the field, she notes. And this description, of course, rings of the Hebrew ideal of the lost Garden of Eden. But clearly what we're describing here is the destruction of the homeland, and then its resurrection by a group of beings who went and retrieved the only relic, the Tet or Jed pillar, that enabled them to restart civilization. And again, the correspondence with the Garden of Eden story is very clear. We're talking about the time when ultimately humankind were created and when there was a devastating cataclysm, the flood that destroyed humanity because of the influence, according to the Essenes, of dirty watchers. There are two classes of these angels that came down. You have the good watchers who brought the secrets of heaven, and you have the dirty watchers who brought about cataclysm. And as the Essenes told us, it was the dirty watchers, the fallen ones, that ultimately created such havoc for humanity. So what happens then is that the Edfu texts tell us that the falcons or sages then build a great cedar temple of the falcon. When this temple is threatened by rising waters, the falcons are instructed to enter the enigmatic place in which the things of the earth were filled with power, another name for the island of the egg, and here they conduct spells which makes the waters recede. To do so, they use power tools named relics, which are stored within the island of the egg, suggesting the powers of these relics. They have the ability to keep water away or to cause waters to recede from the island. In my AI scheme, these relics can be interpreted as advanced creation devices. These are nanotechnology or artificial intelligence devices that have this kind of capability. The Edfu texts come to a close by telling us that gradually the divine sages are replaced by the Shemsu Hor, the pre-dynastic ancestors of the Egyptians who were led by Horus. The royal papyrus of Turin, which was written during the time of Ramses II, the son of King Seti, reports that the reign of the Shemsu Hor stretches to remote antiquity up to a fantastic 40,000 years. These kings lists call the Shemsu Hor Aku, meaning transfigured spirits or beings of light, inferring that the Shemsu Hor were light beings. Well, of course they were, because these are the same as the ancestor light beings, the formless light beings that originally came from the stars. They are replaced by the Horus kings at the time of the First Dynasty in 3100 BC. So here you see a page torn out of E.A. Wally Budge's Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary that defines the Akut as beings of light, wise, instructed folk. Goes on to say they are the light god. These are the ancestors of light who I'm proposing brought this technology to Earth originally. The Shemsu Hor, by the way, are credited with the creation of the cat. And my dear cat Boo, my other cat Scoopy, you see in the background here, they wanted you to know that the cats are believed, the ancient Egyptians believed that these gods, the Shemsu Hor, these illuminated light beings, could incarnate as cats. Robert Bauval speculates that the Shemsu Hor were a lineage of real and immensely powerful and enlightened individuals, masters of the science of astronomy whose purpose was to bring fruition to a great cosmic blueprint. I take that a step further based on what we've been describing here, that the Shemsu Hor are the lineage of these ancestors who came from the stars, these celestial light beings who projected themselves into the cosmos and replicated their bodies or self-replicated their bodies through some AI or nanotechnology when they arrived on Earth. The Edfu texts tell us the Shemsu Hor were led by two divine beings who are described as the companions of the divine heart, whose names were Wa and Ea. They recovered the Jed pillar, also called the perch, which they had set up in the field of reeds. And it's inherently possible, says Yves Raymond, that the perch was erected in the same place as that in which the Jed pillar of the Pian god once stood, probably close to the Jed pillar supporting Hathor, and also near the place where the symbols of the creator were hidden. Some people believe this is actually the Giza Plateau that we're talking about, the Great Pyramid Complex and the Hall of Records. I don't have anything to contradict that or dispute that possibility. It's explained that the falcon had arrived thereafter, alighted on the perch, and was uplifted by the reed. And through the power of the reed perch, this Osiris device, actually, or the Jed pillar, the gods were uplifted or resurrected, and the dead or dark world was brought into light. It's clear that the Jed pillar had the power of resurrection. It could resurrect the gods and resurrect the field of the blessed. And after the new divine being alighted upon it, the ancestral falcons were awakened from their slumber. They returned to the place where they formerly ruled in their spiritual forms. So these beings are no longer in physical form. They have now, through this pillar, been dematerialized back into their light body form. Two Tet or power towers uphold the serpents here in the glass tubes as seen on the walls of the crypt at Dendera. Eric von Daniken entertains you with the idea that these are light bulbs or cathode ray tubes. I'm not so sure. I think that these are the Tet pillars. These are resurrection machines, is what we're seeing here. And that it's symbolic of the resurrection technology of the original creator gods, the ancestors. From this vantage point, what we are seeing here is that this perch, this technology, takes on the feel of either an antenna beaming divine powers or vibrations from the other dimensional field of the blessed, or it's a Genesis device like a von Neumann machine, a self-replicating spacecraft. And I believe that what we are seeing here is that the Edfu texts, in fact, chronicle the arrival of Astro Chicken type cedar ships. The parallels between the ancient Egyptian story and modern science fiction are certainly worthy of serious consideration. If you're interested in following up on this story with us personally, Claire and I invite you to join us for Stargate Egypt in October 2016, when we'll be going on site at Dendera, Abydos, Edfu, Great Pyramid, and investigating this firsthand. We'd love to have you join us. Go to my website, williamhenry.net, for details about that tour. I want to conclude here by bringing this into more of a slightly more modern context and show you how this symbolism then followed through into, in this case, as we're going to see, Christianity. Remember, in Budge's Hieroglyphic Dictionary, we see the hieroglyph for the Aku, the wise instructed folk, the light beings, the good people, those who bring protection. All of these are ideas that are associated with these beings. As Graham Hancock and Robert Babal also explain in The Message of the Sphinx, the hieroglyphs of Aku can also mean transfigured beings, shining ones, or shining beings. And this is perfectly consistent with what we saw in the Edfu text about these ancestral beings. They are formless light beings who could take on physical manifestation. So take a look at this image here on the left of the transfiguration of Jesus, the moment when he took the disciples up to the top of the mountain and revealed himself as a being of light. He is actually standing in an egg-shaped glyph with 3 rays of light extending from it. This is exactly the hieroglyph of the Aku, the beings of light, the wise instructed folk. I took this photo at the Coptic or Egyptian Christian church in Aswan, Egypt. And it's possible that the artist here had no knowledge of what he was doing when he places Jesus in an egg of transfiguration and shows him transfiguring or metamorphosing into a light being. But perhaps he knew exactly what he was doing. Perhaps he knew that Christianity is the Egyptian religion with the names changed. Christianity, especially its teachings about transfiguration, can be traced directly back through Osiris, but before Osiris can be traced directly back to the ancestral beings, the elder beings, the light beings from the island of the egg. So what we're talking about here is a continuous line of transmission from at least 40,000 years ago, perhaps, up into the modern age, if you will, of 2,000 years ago. Here's the complete image here where we see Moses and Elijah on either side of the transfigured Jesus. He's portrayed enfolded within the Nemsi's crown of the pharaohs, suggesting or hinting directly at that Egyptian connection between mystical Christianity and its origins in ancient Egypt. We can go to Italy, in San Marco, in Venice, where we see John the Baptist baptizing Jesus with the Holy Spirit, who's manifesting from an open or an opening in heaven, a stargate. And we see the dove descending, and we see the light of the Holy Spirit splitting into 3 cosmic rays, exactly like the hieroglyph of the Aku. In another transfiguration scene, we see Jesus in his bright white garment of light, indicating that he's in his formless light being mode or phase. And the garment extends down into 3 rays, making him once again into the hieroglyph of the Akut, or the beings of light. We see the same thing here in this image from Crete, where Jesus, again, in a transfiguration scene, is showing himself as one of the Akut, the transfigured, wise beings of light. Over and over again in the transfiguration scenes, we see Jesus as this transfigured man. He's gone from flesh and blood into a star man. This is the journey of the soul. And this is what I believe the Watcher angels brought with them when they brought the secrets of heaven. They brought with them the secrets of metamorphosis or ascension, the transformation of a human into a celestial being, a star being. And this is the ultimate object of our quest, is to reclaim these teachings. Now, today, we have in Silicon Valley and elsewhere around the world technologists who are working on creating exactly this type of a scenario where we will dematerialize our physical bodies into a formless form. We will upload the contents of our brain into a light being form of ourselves, an avatar form of ourselves that will live in a simulated reality. This isn't a road that I'm encouraging people to go down, but what I'm showing is that technologically, we are at or near the very same place as these proposed ancestral beings were at when they sent the self-replicating cedar ship, the Astro Chicken, to Earth and formed the island of the egg. And we are now at their same level of consciousness. And what I propose for viewers such as yourself is that we now have an opportunity to duplicate that within ourselves. Our technology can duplicate it, but we can also duplicate it with our consciousness. And my view is that we want to, of course, stay organic. We want to follow the consciousness path, because ultimately that will be the path that will lead us to the greatest possible sense of authority, liberty, power, ability, privilege, capacity, and strength. These are all of the things the robe of light, the robe of sanctity, the robe of glory, the shining garment, the garment of light, or the beaming garment of the transfigured ones provides for us. It's encoded within us. It's probable that they were the ones who originally encoded this within us. And now is the time for us to begin to develop our consciousness of ascension, our ascension intelligence, as I call it. Because if we don't, the risk is that the artificial intelligence that is now being developed and utilized on this planet could potentially prohibit us from ultimately attaining our organic light bodies. I said a moment ago that I wanted to connect the early Christian mystics with this line of advanced light beings. And here's some more connective tissue for you to do that. In the Apocrypha of John, which is one of the secret Gnostic Gospels, it's called the Secret Book of John, we learn what purport to be secret teachings revealed by Jesus in a post-resurrection appearance to the Apostle John. The opening words describe a confrontation in the temple between John and a Pharisee who claims that the Nazarene, Jesus, led John away from the original temple teachings. In the story, John goes into the desert and concludes that he really doesn't know anything about where Jesus came from, how he got here, or about this celestial realm he predicted would be the ultimate destiny of all of us. Suddenly, the heavens open, and the whole creation which is below heaven shone, and the world was shaken. Jesus suddenly appears to him in the midst of a brilliant flash of light. He starts to morph. He's first a youth, then an old man, then a small child. And as the luminous being Jesus begins to speak, John realizes that it's Jesus. And Jesus says to him, I have come to teach you about what is and what was and what will be, in order for you to understand the invisible world and the world that is visible and the immovable race of perfect humanity. Raise your head, he says. Understand my lessons. Share them with any others who have received the Spirit, who are from the immovable race of perfect humanity. What this book goes on to tell us is that Jesus is part of a race of ancestral beings who are referred to as the immovable race, or the immovable race of perfect light humans. It's very clear to me that what's happened here is that Jesus, who is also the priest of the order of Melchizedek, another of these self-created beings, is connecting himself with these original ancestral light beings who came to Earth on a mission to evolve humanity. The immovable race of the perfect light human appear to be adepts who have manifested these original bodies of light. Jesus tells John that you have entered into a consideration of great things such as are difficult to disclose to anyone except those who are from that immovable race. He goes on to say that the seed which he raised up in the thought of the people of the race of the perfect eternal light human, the immovable race of the perfect light human, telling us once again that there is this separate race of humans who have attained this ultimate manifestation. And they have come to Earth on a mission to invite us to join them. We know that because this is the mission of the seraphim angels. And this is why we see the blue birds, the blue avians, if you will, the seraphim, the surrounding Jesus, are forming a portal or a star door around his throne. In Christianity, some believe Jesus is the new Horus, or the head of the blue bird tribe. He is equal to them. He is among the perfect light humans. And while the bluebirds, the blue angels that we see surrounding Jesus don't look like Horus, they are the same tribe of beings. They are blue seraphim. They are winged serpents. They are part of the same tribe, original tribe, that Horus represented in Egypt, that the ancient Egyptians at Edfu told us originally came from the stars. Their vortex-shaped bodies of these blue angels, the blue avians, the blue seraphim, indicate that they're spinning or vibrating at a frequency beyond normal human comprehension. They're always present at the throne of Christ. And as I said, the idea is that these are the angelic interveners, the ancestral race that came here on a mission to accelerate human evolution. The seraphim were present at the creation of humanity. They are the bluebirds, the blue avians that surround God, however you want to think of God. Can you spot the bluebirds here? Hint, take a look in the blue eyes where you're going to find them. They're, of course, surrounding the throne of Christ, who is here wearing a blue robe, indicating that he is also at this same frequency. This is the frequency of the ancestral beings, the light beings in ancient Egypt. And what we're witnessing here is the crossover from ancient Egypt into the Christian tradition. This is why you will see Jesus riding around on a blue sphere, as you do here in Ravenna in Egypt. It indicates that he has mastered the forces of space-time and can make quantum jumps through the cosmos, through the blue spheres that the blue angels utilize as a mode of transportation. Because this blue sphere, in my opinion, has exactly the same meaning as what we saw back in Dendera and back in Egypt. It is the wormhole or the stargate that these beings use to travel through the cosmos. In conclusion, I want to leave you with some thoughts from a philosopher named Dr. Oliver Reiser, who put forth a magnificent theory concerning the memory field. He argued that the Earth is a living being, a giant creature, an egg, an island of an egg, if you will, or island of the egg, with the plant and animal kingdoms forming functionally the entoderm and the ectoderm of the giant Earth egg, with the human race constituting the maturing nervous system of the embryo and the individual persons serving as the neuroblasts of the creature. He viewed the eastern and western hemispheres as analogous to the right and left lobes of the human brain. Together, they are spinning out lines of force or wires, weaving an electromagnetic society a field. And all of human history is aiming at the awakening of this planetary brain. In Reiser's theory, the planetary cortex of the electromagnetic society gives rise to a psi field, a term used to refer to psychic abilities. Each of us is in a feedback loop with the psi field, which is also known as the new sphere to philosopher Teilhard de Chardin. In theory, the sphere or field records all human thought forms. The Akashic field or Akashic records is another term used to describe this global psychosphere or thought sphere, if you will. According to de Chardin, the thought sphere is evolving into a form of super consciousness. The trigger for this evolution is humankind's awareness of itself and the earth as constituting a unified organism that is merged into a single spirit of the earth. This is what I see happening today with our artificially intelligent internet. In the years to come, what we're going to see is that we have created a new synthetic neocortex into which all of us are now woven. And it is taken on now artificial intelligence. And as we reach this moment they refer to as the singularity, the machines that we are creating will soon have greater intelligence than the combined intelligence of humanity. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy in the book of Revelation of a new heaven and a new earth. We are the ones who are creating it. And the new earth will be beatified and perfected to what God originally created and where righteousness dwells. It's been predicted that everything in the future will be connected and communicate with one another. There's even a phrase for it, the Internet of Things. In 2010, there were 12.5 billion smart things on the planet. In 2015, there were 25 billion. By 2020, there will be 50 billion connected things on the Internet of Things as this new artificially intelligent superbrain takes over. What I'm proposing is that this is the seed that was planted long ago. And we are now living the fulfillment of this seed. We are the flowering of this seed, of the activity begun by the ancestral beings. And it's up to us to raise our level of awareness, raise our consciousness, and aim for our light bodies, because in so doing, we will increase our ascension intelligence and make it possible for us to be shining lights for all on this path. So I want to thank you very much for spending this time with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this walk into mythology of the ancient Egyptians and this combination of what we see happening in our modern scientific world. It's an incredibly special time, and every moment, every breath is precious. And I'm truly grateful that you've chosen once again to spend this time with me this evening. God bless you all, and thank you very much for being here. God bless you.